Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Richard Quest, anchor CNN.
Finally, the traffic was so quick.
We'll try this one more time.
You want to come back?
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay, so I'd like you to all do a little thing
have
for me
1 hour.
before I call the panel up
Okay,
for me.
1 hour.
I assume
So it's 1 text.
the majority of people in this
I can
room,
come back.
we're going to do something interactive to
Okay.
prove that even those of us over 50 can be interactive. Could you please take out your devices, your digital devices, and switch them on, and so I can see, we're going to do like the concert, you're going to wave them. Could I see them all, please? Right. Now, proving that you're all intelligent people, now go to Settings. And now switch your devices to airplane mode. And that will be the last time you will use them over the next hour and 10 minutes. Because, my lords, ladies and gentlemen, if you have difficulty restraining yourself from looking at the WhatsApp to tell you that the cat needs feeding, then I suggest you go and see a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because you're in the wrong place. Ladies and gentlemen, the board is now in session. May I ask the board members to join me, please? His Excellency Khaldoon Khalif Al Mubarak, the CEO of Mubadala Investment Company. Ms. Anna Patricia Botin, the Group Executive Chair of Banco Santander. Ray Dalio, the Founder, Chair and CIO of Bridgewater. Larry Fink, the Chair and CEO of Blackrock. Dr. Patrice Motsepe, the Founder of the African Rainbow Alliance. David Solomon, the Chair and CEO of Goldman Sachs. Steve Schwartzman, the Chair and CEO and co-founder of Blackstone. The board is now in session. Adjust your chairs accordingly so that you are comfortable. Ray Dalio, Gloria Gaynor started us off with, "I will survive." Remarkably appropriate, because we're not talking about thriving, we're talking about surviving. What pillar are you focusing on?
Well, I think the world, there's a changing world order, the changing system that we're operating by. And I think we're confused about that. You know, in 1945, we created a system in which the United States was a leading power, a rich power, and capitalism was the means of operating. And those things are changing. So we're a bit confused, I think, for example, on capitalism. Capitalism has been a remarkable resource allocation system, but at the same time, we're trying to replace it because it has failed to provide the equal opportunities, and it's failed to provide resource allocation in a way that takes into consideration the total cost of items, things like pollution and so on. So this is a moment, I think, where we have to rethink what that means. So I would say the most important question as we think about the resource allocations that we're dealing with is, what is the cost? And how do you determine the new total cost of the various things that we're trying to accomplish? And I think, and then who plays what positions in terms of the world order? What is the role of different countries? What is the leadership? How do you work together? If you don't know how to work together, if you don't know what the system is, it's like a bunch of kids playing soccer and they just run around the field and they haven't yet known how to play their position. So I think that we're in the process of working that out, and I think it is very important in terms of the immediate aspects of that, like the producing of money and credit. There's been a lot of money and credit been produced. That has its implications. So when I look at that, I think the answer, though, is going to be in entrepreneurship and technology to create a whole world. In other words, the inventiveness. The one advantage that we have, and we see it in the kingdom, is the talent of young people who come up with great ideas, entrepreneurship, the inventiveness that we're seeing take place with IPOs and new ideas, and the technology that exists. But that has to be worked for the benefit of the entire society in a total society, cost-effective way so we don't waste resources. So I think that those are the big questions. The biggest question is how we're going to be with each other.
How we're going to?
Be with each other.
Thank you, sir. For those of you who are wondering why I'm using my digital device, it is to ensure that the members of the board stay on time. It will usually be indicated with a light cough. It will then become a little more, finally resulting in, you don't want to get to that next stage. Excellency, what for you is the pillar that you are addressing for us today?
Well, first of all, I have to say, Richard, it's a pleasure being in Riyadh today. It's been a while. We've all lived interesting 2 years, so I think it's a great thing probably for all of us. So on behalf of this board, and I have to say, this is a pretty interesting board. If we have that board for a business enterprise, I think it'll be interesting to put some money with this board. I'm going to talk about, from my perspective, 3 challenges that we're all dealing with and are really global challenges that pretty much everybody in this room is dealing with in one way or another. First is the climate challenge. The second is the disparity in the COVID recovery, which impacts all of us. And the third is the economic challenges that effectively we are all dealing with globally, and how we can navigate as investors going forward in the best way possible for humanity and for us from a rate of return perspective. First one, I think when we're talking about the global climate challenge, it's real. It's real, and for us as Mubadala, this is not a challenge that we recognize today, but we've recognized probably 15 years ago as an investment theme, meaning it's an investment theme based on a reality that we anticipated, and we started, our renewable energy investment platform started back in 2006, and we've invested over almost $20 billion over these last 16 years in renewable energy in over 30 countries. And it's proven to be a healthy investment theme that has achieved great positive rates of returns for us as investors. But more importantly, it's a contribution from us to this solution. The climate challenge is going to require everybody to contribute in their way. Nobody's going to solve it on their own. We have to all solve it together, and we have to solve it working together globally as institutions, as governments, as civil society, and it's a responsibility that we have to take it upon us all. Everybody in their own way and in their own capability. The second component, first theme, we have to invest in a way to support the handling of the climate challenge. The second theme in terms of the COVID recovery, this is something that has hit us all over the last 2 years. And again, it's really supercharged this digital transformation. Any institution, every one of us here around this table, I am sure, woke up one day and realized we were not fast enough on the digital transformation route. We have to go faster, and we have to look at technology and innovation in a way and in a speed very different than that speed of January or 2020 or December 19. And again, that's a very important thematic view for us all as investors. You're going to give me the first knock?
We can have another 30 seconds.
I will do it better. I'll come back on the third point after you've turned the table.
I'm grateful. The pillar, Ms. Botten, the pillar that you wish us to focus on in this board meeting.
So, just going to the context of what the conference is about, and as leaders of large companies, the best way for us, at least I believe this, for me to invest in humanity with 150 million customers, that's the number of customers of Santander today in the world, of which 4 million SMEs, it's really to take care of them, take care of my people. We have 100,000 people talking to customers every day. So first, deliver on the numbers. I'm sure Larry would appreciate that for our shareholders, in the right way, with a clear purpose, which is to help my customers and all my stakeholders prosper in a way that is simple, personal, and fair. And second, to do that in a way that it reaches the maximum number of people. And the priorities for me, it'll be very short, but it's going bottom up. So I think we solve the big problems by going one at a time. For every big solution, there's dozens and thousands of small ones that we can scale, and we can design the big solutions to make sure they work for the vulnerable people, the small companies. It's going to work much better. I have a customer in the Canary Islands called Yuconda. She's an immigrant from Venezuela. She has a laundry, industrial laundry. She cleans 14 tons of linen every day. She has solar panels, and she has digitized a microchip in every sheet and towel. She contacted me through LinkedIn, social media. In the pandemic, her sales went from 2 million to 200,000. She needed help. And we helped her with financing. That's what we do as a bank. And there you have the three priorities. It's about women, it's about climate change, and it's about small companies. And at the end of the day, it is how we together can grow the global economic pie. It's the biggest, and do that, by the way, in a sustainable way. That's the biggest master problem of the century.
Thank you. Steve Schwartzman.
Well, thanks, Richard, and thanks for all the terrific people on the panel. It's fun to be with you today and on other days as we're traveling around the world. I have two types of things that I think about when addressing this issue. The first is, what can you do in a commercial setting that's practical? I have a company I started called Blackstone. We have, among other things, just to set a context, we own 260 companies in our private equity part of our business with 560,000 people. So this is a pretty good-sized operation. And you know, our parent company is around 3,500 now. And so as we look at our business, we say, what can we do to make the world better? And this applies to basically pretty much almost everybody in the audience. And we look at this from an ESG perspective. We have Chief Sustainability Officer, and then in each one of our business lines, we have somebody that is also a sustainability officer. So we're trying to get rid of carbon, we're trying to do best practices, and you can be quite successful when you focus on this and you set specific objectives. So for example, we're trying to get rid of 15% of our electricity that we use so that the world doesn't have to generate anymore, and we're quite successful doing that. So setting objectives is important. We had an interesting one, as I was sitting there saying, what am I going to talk about? This regards equality of opportunity. And like many people in finance, we were having a lot of trouble hiring women. It was a male-dominated business, and we made a decision to change that in 2015. And we analyzed it, and what we realized is that women weren't applying to Blackstone. They were, and we tried to find out why, and we found out that they were scared of us. I don't think I'm very scary.
Steve, I was scared of you.
But it is scary to be the only woman always surrounded by men.
Right.
Let me tell you, I've gone through that.
Right.
That's the problem.
So what we did is we went to some of the great universities as sophomores And we met a lot of women and said, geez, you know what, why don't you do like an internship down at the firm? You'll find out that we're sort of nice people. We do really interesting work.
Did you change the culture that created the vision that you were scary?
No, we adapt to culture. The culture was the same. The difference was people didn't understand what the culture was. So we brought sophomores down. What happened is they had a great time, and then we went back again, and we kept recruiting all through it. Now what's happened 7 years later, roughly, is we now have our entering classes are 50% women, up from 10. So the reason I tell you this story is that these things are really possible. But you have to identify what the blockage is and go out and address it and solve it. And so, you know, we're orienting our business and changing it now. In the green world, we put out $11 billion in the last 2 years buying sustainable types of things. So what I'm saying is that for everybody in this audience and everybody up at this table who's all doing adaptive things, this is really possible. And when we come back later, because I don't want to dominate the time, because you got loads of smart people here, I want to talk about philanthropy.
Fine.
And how philanthropy can impact this issue big time, big scale.
All right. Thank you. Patrice, would you like to tell us what is the pillar that you are taking us to focus on?
Well, there are two dominant themes worldwide. The dominant issue now is climate change, as well as COVID-19. But my main concern is the 300 million young people between the age of 15 and 25 in Africa. And of course, there are hundreds of millions of young people worldwide. We do business globally, but in this context, we are focusing on providing skills and expertise, education, technology, the impact of the fourth industrial revolution, and how technology can create a bright future. The 300 million young people are a demographic dividend, potentially a demographic dividend. If we do not create an exciting and a bright future for them, it will indeed become a demographic time bomb. So we were very optimistic, and I think the engine of giving them a bright future is, of course, partnership between government and the private sector, but the private sector has a unique role to play in a globally competitive investment environment in the African continent.
David Solomon, Goldman Sachs, your opening pillar that you want us to support.
There are lots of.
I think so, yes.
There are lots of issues that have been raised and have been highlighted.
I'm not sure that Mr. Solomon's microphone is working, so whilst you get him another microphone, just try again, sir. No?
That's your speaker.
Here's your backup. Thank you.
That one doesn't work either.
You have to listen to Goldman Sachs.
On and off.
Hello?
All right.
Right. Go ahead.
That's a talent to figure that out. First of all, now that my microphone is working, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, the opportunity to be with this esteemed group. There are a lot of issues that have been mentioned and have been identified. I'd put forward a pillar that we've spent a lot of time focusing on because we think it's one of the solutions to drive economic participation and growth, and that's support for small businesses broadly, and finding ways that we all can contribute to the growth and innovation that comes in all our communities from small businesses. You know, we start from a premise that we do not have the right to operate in all the communities that we operate in. We have to earn that every single day, and so we've tried over a long period of time to build platforms that provide support using the resources we have as an organization, people, capital, and technology to drive innovation, change, and economic growth. And small businesses are a great platform in all economies. They're a huge part of economic vitality. And I think we've shown through programs like 10,000 Women and 10,000 Small Businesses that exist, that we've sponsored for over a decade, and now other programs that we've launched, including Launch with GS or 1 Million Black Women, that if you take those resources, you direct them in a targeted way, and just as Steve was talking about when he was talking about recruiting and diversity, you hold yourself accountable over a period of time for making investment and therefore getting return, you can make real progress and you can support businesses and grow economic activity broadly. And so the more we can find ways, and COVID has been very, very harsh all over the world to small businesses, the more we can find ways to lift those small businesses up, the more we can bring people along and help them participate.
Thank you. Larry.
Well, when I was watching the film and seeing how large the world is and all the problems of the world, as an individual, you feel quite small. You ask yourself, you know, the world is so large, can you make a difference? And the reality is, if we bring all private sector together with the public sector, we could make large change. We could solve many problems. And the problem we have in the world today is we see a dominance of the public sector trying to do it all. We see that through rising deficits. And we haven't focused on how to bring private capital alongside public capital. And it is very clear that private capital, if you look at where yields are today, and everybody aggressively looking to find investments, the pools of private capital are more enormous today. The liquidity today is more enormous. Whether that it will sustain itself in a different economic regime, we could ask that ourselves question. But this moment, capital is abundant. Capital needs to be put to work, and we have not a foundation to doing it. Now, most of the capital is retirement assets. Even at my firm, 2/3 of all the trillions of dollars we manage is assets for retirement. We have to live under a rule called the fiduciary rule. So we have to be very thoughtful in how we employ somebody's hard earnings. Yeah. BlackRock is not an owner of any of this capital. We're an asset advisor to all the owners of capital. So our job is at the nexus of trying to bring forward that capital and invest it accordingly. So one, as that fiduciary, as all asset managers are, we have a responsibility of making sure that we apply their capital in a reasonable and a responsible way. And that is a big difficulty. And so we have to reimagine how we bring finance forward, how we bring finance forward to effectuate the change of climate risk and poverty in different parts. We do not have that platform in the world. And importantly, last thing I would just say, we don't have long-term planning by most governments to effectuate these long-term problems.
Right, free for all, join in. When you say we don't have long-term planning, define long-term planning.
20 plus years, 30 years. You know, when you are 20 years old and you're putting your first deposit into your retirement account, you have a 40 to 50-year journey. That's a long journey. And in many cases, that is the journey in which we could invest their capital in if we have the mechanism in doing that and we have the role. We have to reimagine the World Bank and the IMF. We are going to have to focus on how to bring this money forward if we are going to bring the capital to get the emerging world forward in climate risk.
Is there a danger we take on too much at this point, Ray Dalio? Is there a danger that the agenda becomes overloaded to the point where nothing gets done?
Well, I think the question is, how do you get done? Who's playing what roles? Who has what power? How does the system work, right? We're coming into there will be revolutions in every dimension of our lives. Revolutions in terms of how capital is shared, of course, but also revolutions in terms of and they could either be peaceful, productive revolutions, or they can be difficult revolutions. And I think that the question of how does the system work so that we reform both the political system and the economic system, so we are collectively. The amount of resources that we have has never been greater, but the amount of problems we have, and we don't have a system, really, of who has what power and how do we even allocate resources.
So come off the fence. What change do you want to see?
Can I say something?
Of course.
Yeah, so to address Larry's point, which is crucial, is how do we get a system that works where you are rewarded for long-term investment?
Answer your own question.
So the way is to change the incentives. If you ask me the hardest thing about my job, I have to deliver every quarter, but I have to deliver in 20 years. My company is 160 years old. My problem is that I need to transform legacy infrastructure. That might sound familiar to many in the room. How do we get capital from Larry's ultimate customers and shareholders and owners, so I get the chance not just to deliver, I need to deliver every quarter, pay a dividend in a way that is very difficult to invest. So we know what we have to do. We just need time, and we need to change the system. Because whatever...
You are the system.
No, no, the system means that he demands, please, results, profits, dividends every quarter. How do we get rewarded, really rewarded, in a way we can invest for the future? And that is not happening enough, because the system is set up for quarterly reporting. So you can go on CNN and say how much money we made in the quarter. Did we beat the earnings on the quarter?
It took 28 minutes before somebody blamed the media.
You're not the only one.
David, I Googled your company.
You agree?
All everybody says is, when's he going to raise the share price? When's he going to get the share price back up again? I don't ask you to answer that question, although you're welcome to if you'd like to. However, I do ask you, is that the problem, that everybody's focused on how you're going to get to the same EPS as your competitors, the same valuations as your competitors?
I think in my responsibility of shepherding a 153-year-old company, I try to strike a balance between short-term performance and making long-term investment to drive long-term results. I try to take care of our people. I try to take care of our clients. As I said 2 minutes ago, we try to invest in the communities that we operate in. To frame a little bit where Larry started to go, it's easy for companies to be held accountable for the decisions they make over some period of time. We can debate whether it's too short or it's too long, et cetera. Politics is harder. Politics is a short-term, in most democracies, politics is a short-term game. And somehow we have to find a way for our governments to partner with the private sector, to find incentives for those partnerships to be longer dated and more thoughtful, and that's complicated. Certainly complicated in the nation that I am from and I reside in, and I'm hopeful that over time we can find ways to continue to invest in our future. But you're not going to get a solution to that from the 7 people sitting up here.
No, but we'll get guidance from one of them, because one of them doesn't have a quarterly reporting season.
Well, I have 2 words, sense and sensibility. I think I'm lucky to be representing an investment institution that has a shareholder that is able to allow me and my management team and my investment professionals at Mubadala to take a long-term view, to take a patient investment view without compromising returns. I will argue, and I think probably most of my colleagues around the table, our investment demands are very similar to what David has, to what Larry's shareholders demand, to what Anna's public markets demand, but we are able to do it and manage it with a long-term view and with a patient approach. And believe me, I couldn't agree with everyone more here. It starts with the management of expectations of the public markets and the differentiation between, and you're seeing it already, between how private equity is managed versus how public companies are managed. And the decision-making in terms of investment, in terms of deployment, in terms of divestment, and how it's driven by pressures that are not necessarily in the long-term interest of the investor/shareholder. I want to add one point, because it's relevant to the climate point I started with. Let's look at the pressures right now in terms of that are being put on investment institutions and particularly, let's call the energy companies. Company X or Y, without naming names, I want to be as PC as possible here. They get pressure from the public shareholders. They get pressures from companies like Blackrock or Blackstone or Goldman to sell, to pursue an investment or a divestment strategy on their oil and gas assets, to pursue this greener approach. We're all for that greener approach. The challenge is when company X divests of asset Y because of pressures from the public, and then private equity D acquires that asset and operates it at a lesser environmental standard than company X,
and regulators and
without effectively doing anything on the climate argument. That's not optimal.
So I don't manage our business with the pressures that Anna has or David has. You know, we were a relatively new company. 36 years sounds like a lot of pain and suffering, but compared to the age of Goldman, you know, we're like newbies, and Santander as well. You've got some amazing companies here. When we went public in 2007, I wrote on the cover of the prospectus that we were going to manage the company as a private business the way we had been. We were not going to give earnings guidance to anybody, and we were always going to make what we thought was the right long-term decisions. And we've continued to do that, and we haven't particularly been punished. You know, we've outperformed the S&P like in a very significant way. And you can, you know, I can't control all these short-term things anyhow. And we're in the business of buying assets and fixing them up and making them better. I just care that we realize our vision on each thing that we own and transform it in a really good way. And then it'll all work out. And that may not be the most profound approach, but it certainly makes you less anxious as a person. And a final thing, Anna said it wasn't fun being the only woman, as you can see.
Actually, it was fun, but it was difficult.
Yeah, difficult. So what we've done, and this is in the helpful hints category to people here, we set up groups for people who felt that way within our firm. And they meet every month. And we have a group for women, a group for diverse people, for veterans, and for the LGBTQ. And anybody can attend any of those meetings. You don't have to be a woman to go to the women's group if you want to learn more. And if you set things up like this, where people are included, they discuss the issues that are bothering them, and we have a way of fixing them, then you can run a much more humane type of operation with happier people.
I was going to come to Patrice, but I think did you want to say something on the...
Yeah, look, I don't believe the problem are public companies at all. The best public companies are companies that are focusing on the long term. They're navigating the short-term issues. We all have to do that. Right. But if you're going to have durable profitability over a long period of time, you're going to have to be focused on all the market movements, all the issues. But it is about the durability of long-term profit is focusing on the long term. The problem is not public companies. The problem is how are we moving society forward? If we're only going to be asking public companies to move forward and not the rest of society, if we're going to ask only banks to be the purveyor and the environmental police, we are not going to achieve climate change. If we're not going to address the emerging world where 34% of the emissions minus China exists and growing, we're not going to get to a net zero world. If we're truly focusing on improving humanity, it is going to have to be, as I said before, using the public companies as a model, but having the public companies working alongside the rest of society. But if government does not ask all of society to move forward together,
But we're back to that issue then.
but they're not doing that, and that's going to be creating more polarization between large and small. It's going to make public companies, alongside banks, the environmental police. There are many things that are going on right now that is transforming public companies, but we're moving so slowly related to the rest of society, and that's going to create, Richard, even more polarization. And we're living that right now with rising energy prices as we sit here right now, a high probability of $100 oil because of inefficient short-term policies. And we're not focusing on long-term solutions. We're not trying to change the world in a granular basis. We have these visions. We could go from a brown world and we could wake up tomorrow to be a green world. That is not going to happen.
Patrice, I want to take to you on that point. The whole thing of FII, investment in humanity, make things better. We're going backwards at the moment, aren't we? Well, we're going backwards because the inequality in wealth is growing, along with the vaccine inequality, which is creating a developed versus developing world.
I think it, go ahead.
We always have to look at the world from a perspective of being half full rather than half empty. There'll always be challenges.
It's emptying is what I'm saying.
I agree with you. But
I don't agree.
well,
I don't agree.
I don't agree with you.
All right?
I don't agree either.
Would you agree with me or not?
On what?
You,
That is,
is the glass emptying or filling?
is it empty?
I think we're
And I
we're
wanna say
a bunch of capitalists operating within
Right.
a capitalist
What are you going to
system.
tell you? You have the wrong panel.
And as a bunch of capitalists operating within a capitalist system, we think, okay, what? And I think the real question is systemic. Look at it as a machine. Is it producing the outcomes? Is profit making as a goal and a mechanism adequate? Okay, the system is not adequate. In other words, it's producing the outcomes we're talking about. So, for example, when you ask the question of, I think, for whose benefit, when we talk about what we're doing, for whose benefit, or for what benefit? Is that all encompassing? Or does it include climate? No, the system itself, just the profit-making system, is not adequate. So the system itself has got to be reformed. Don't throw it away. When I say reformed, for God's sakes, don't throw it away because it's fabulous. But bring it up to the stage where it's all-inclusive to achieve the goals that need to be
How?
How?
How? Any of you?
well, through partnerships. Partnerships between the private sector, government, civil society. And I think there's total consensus here. The developing world, there's a sense of urgency. There's a sense of things have to happen. And when all of us work together, I mean, Larry can't be more correct. The private sector carries a disproportionate burden. But we have a stake in a society and a world that grows and succeeds.
Well, let me give you a blueprint of something incredible that has happened over the last 2 years. Amazing. We had a pandemic that started in January of 2020. Within 12 months, through public-private partnership and through small companies, BioNTech, Moderna, Novavax, a global solution went from the science to the actual production of vaccines and actual delivery of vaccines within less than 12 months. Yes. That is remarkable. That is a blueprint that shows you exactly what Larry's saying, exactly the positivity that some of us are saying, is why this is not emptying, because there's a blueprint and it's shown to actually be able to deliver.
All right, I'll take you on this. Assume you're right, that the public-private partnership, although I would argue it was more public than private. It was the government who put the vast amounts of the money in and really created the stimulus and changed the regulatory framework and changed the litigation framework. But I'll accept that. Taking that point, it took a pandemic to do it. these other issues that we're talking about, global inequality, HIV, climate change, they are incremental to the point, Larry Fink, and then Ray Dalio, that it's almost impossible to get that same impetus.
It took a pandemic to accelerate it. If you're saying that there was nothing there was years of investment, of technology, of thought that put us in a position that when government money came in partnership with this private sector investment, we were able to accomplish a vaccine for society in a short period of time. Now, that doesn't solve everything. We still have vaccine disparity. Those are right on those issues. But imagine a world if we didn't have the technology investment and the effort so that we had a chance at that in that time frame.
So my question becomes, how do you, since you are the players, I am merely the voyeur, how do you harness that energy for the other issues like climate change that's on our doorstep to create that same impetus? Which of you wishes to take that?
So, let me say, because it sort of bridges both questions. You said stimulus, like, first of all, this was not the private sector, individuals, companies creating the problem. And like in a war, it's government's responsibility to take care of its people. So that's my first comment, right? My second is that, let me just give you an example, in many European countries, in the US, but in Spain, we distributed 100 billion to hundreds of thousands of SMEs, where we were assuming part of the risk and the government was assuming the other part. Even though Spain was not the #1 country in amount, we were the fastest, and we got it to the right companies, like my friend in the Canary Islands. This is the power of public and private. 100 billion to 350,000 SMEs in a question of months. And that is what we need to replicate. Because going back to the starting point, if we do not help small companies grow, we are not going to solve the problems of humanity. You need to make the pie bigger in a sustainable way so you can then redistribute and make capitalism work better for everybody. But growth is essential. Without growth and jobs, nothing else is going to happen.
Right.
I think you asked how to, I think first of all, measure it. You have to measure the outcomes. So let's say broad-based prosperity or whatever that might be, you have to measure it. Then you have to have the inventiveness. The greatest power of man is the human inventiveness that we're coming up with that. They have to be provided with resources and incentives that are all in. In other words, that the measurements, something like carbon credits, for example, is an all-in incentive system so that the economics of operating that way work. And so there needs to be that kind of coordination, I think.
I guess two things. First, I want to recommend that everybody buy Ray's book.
I agree.
It's a fantastic book on economic cycles. It's brilliantly researched, and it's really an important lens to understand a variety of the issues we're all dealing with. And I don't even get a commission for this, but it's worth doing. Secondly, in terms of income inequality and humanity, I have always thought that education is the passport to a better life. And I was looking around this stage, and we've got, sort of 5 people that I know of who either went through, or Americans and went through the American education system of our age, or were not Americans and went to an American university. And I say that because these places made us successful. We would not have been on this stage. We would never have enjoyed the kind of training and way to think that's important. And so one of the things I spend a lot of time on is education. An interesting fact, to just show you how important this is, the last time I was in China, I was meeting with one of their senior people, and they were telling me that they were going to have every child in China take computer science. every one of them. And some of them wouldn't make the grade. They wouldn't be adaptive. Now, in the United States, the people in primary and secondary school who take computer science are probably 5%, maybe 10 on a good day. Now, if you're competing globally and you're worried about income and you're not trained for the modern world,
Right.
you will be inadequate. We cannot raise up humanity without having great education. That means you need great teachers. That means you need to change the pay. You could have teachers be the only people in society who don't pay tax, because then you would mark them apart from everyone else. You would increase their compensation. And if we don't make this a priority, Richard, it'll be the uneven outcomes that you're experiencing. And that can be changed.
So-
that is not written.
So before we take some questions for the audience, to the billionaires on this panel, do you support and will you support paying greater taxes as a result of the latest proposals that would target yourselves?
No, not us. We are more than 30% effective tax rate already. We pay 50% tax in some countries. That is for the new digital models, and some countries where you're allowed to pay 5%. But we pay over 30% effective tax rate. I want to leave that clear, and we are very big.
You only pay 30?
We actually pay above.
Larry?
In the US, no, I pay much more on a
Larry,
personal.
under the new proposals
saying
that will
as a-
hit
as
people
a
like yourself,
as
do
a
you support
company.
it? Will you support it?
As a company, personal, I pay
Look,
much
in
more.
New York, we pay 55% total taxes right now.
No, but that's on a personal basis.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm talking about personal.
Okay, yeah, because
That's what I was asking. You were paying 30? That would be good.
no, I'm paying close to 50 on a personal basis, but
Right.
companies in the US
Okay.
pay much less. In Europe,
But the point is that the focus at the moment in the US on personal is for the very rich, the billionaires plus, 700, 800 of them, to pay a surcharge tax. Ray Dalio, would you support that?
Yes, I would support anything that is going to have the effect of being spent on creating equal opportunity and greater productivity. My concern about things has to do with the productivity. If there is a means by which that there is money that is just giving away, that won't be sustainable. So if it raises productivity and creates equal opportunity, that we can't just talk about the raising of money, we have to talk about the usage of money.
Right.
And how that's employed. So that's part of that picture. But yes, if it accomplishes those things, I would support it. I'm
David?
not sure that it does.
You know, I'm with Ray. The tax system, as Larry said, it depends on where you are. Personal tax rates in some places are high, but what's important is how we're taxing, what incentives it creates, and then how is the money being used to make advancement. And so I think you can't answer the question in a black and white way. It depends on what you're spending it on. So the first thing is there's a debate going on in the United States on how much to spend. So what are you spending it on? And then what is the consequence of making those decisions and how do you pay for it? All that's got to be looked at holistically.
Larry?
Well, as I said, as a lover of New York City, I remain in New York City and I pay 55-ish% taxes. So I think when we talk about taxes, we always just think about it at the federal level. I'm not even sure where that money is well spent now. I think this is one of the issues today. But I would agree with everybody. If we could find solutions where the money can be directed in a proper way, you know, I have more to give.
We'll take a question if the board agrees. I've had a note saying, can you take 2 or 3 questions from the room, please? Does the board agree to listen to the shareholders?
do we have
Right.
an option?
Agreed.
Agree. Oh, thank you. Do we have a question? Since somebody put this in front of me, I assume.
There's a hand there.
Where's the hand? Oh, yes, sir. I think it's, yes. And please, I would implore a question, not a speech.
Yes, I'm really grateful to see this high senior people, individuals representing high investment funds across the world. Do you hear me?
Yes, I can, but I'm just trying to make sure that carry on.
Yes. Just a small question. What is the impact of the upcoming interest rates over this climate change investments and also for the short-term capital markets credit bubble that is witnessing across the international markets? How do you see this might affect?
Yep, I got it.
Thank you.
It's a very clever way of asking what you think is going to happen in the markets, addressing it with a bit of climate change. We'll start with you, David Solomon. Rates are going up. The Bank of England will go sooner than most, but the US won't be that far behind. Interest rates and inflation is the key issue. Where do you stand?
Well, we've had very, very accommodative monetary policy for a long period of time. We've had very, very aggressive fiscal policy, and now it's going to have a consequence. I think it's hard to know exactly what that consequence will be. I think part of what the consequence will be dependent on what we choose to do from here. What is the action from central banks? How does fiscal spending continue? But there definitely is inflation in our society now. That's something we have not seen for some period of time. And we could be resetting for a different structural makeup for a period of time. We might not. We'll have to see. But I'm not good at predicting the future, but I certainly think the risk of higher inflation and slower growth based on the actions that have been taken is higher now than it's been for a while. And we'll have to watch that very carefully.
Larry, you think it's sticky, the inflation? You think it's sticky? And therefore, does it warrant stronger policy action than merely talking about tapering before the end of the year, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, inflation is definitely more than transitory, unless you believe transitory in the life of the earth, hundreds of years, thousands of years. So inflation is we're in a new regime, and there are many structural reasons for that. The U.S. movement away from consumerism to more focus on jobs, more of a European type of economic policy, to the short-term policies related to environmentalism in terms of restricting supply of hydrocarbons has created energy inflation, and we're going to be living with that for some time. There was no policy related to the mitigation of demand. It was only supply, so we have now environmental inflation. And we've changed our immigration policies dramatically, and so as a result of that, we have major job shortages across the board. And during COVID, many people have realized and reimagined their work.
So would you prefer, and to Ray, we'll get to Larry then to Ray, would you prefer, same question, that the monetary authorities allow the inflation to run at a higher level, or tamp it back down again if necessary to say 2% or under 2%?
Well, Ray or me?
Start with you, then to you. Well, then he gets the advantage of hearing you.
For 8-9 years, the EU have had a target of 2% and never got there. Okay, so now we're running way above 2% in the EU, way above in the United States. I actually believe monetary policy assisted us out of the problems, and I think they want to see more confidence in the growth of the economy. David said its growth is going to slow down. I believe they need to be acting, and I believe they should be acting sooner. But keep in mind, everyone talks about what does that mean. When you talk about taper, does that mean are they not buying the short end or not buying the long end? The composition of the Fed's policies and other central banks is going to be just as important whether they ease or whether they tighten and how they navigate their monetary policy.
Ray.
I think the answer to the gentleman's question is the reduced value of money. The reduced value of money, not only in terms of the goods and services, but also financial assets. And I think the answer to your question is that central banks, particularly the Federal Reserve, is in an impossible situation because the basic crux of it is we don't have enough money to satisfy all the things that are, all the desires, right? We want to have the social programs, and we want to have the climate remediation, and we want to have wealth gaps resolved, and so on. So the spending demands are much, much greater than the earning capabilities. And as a result of that, you either tax or you have to produce bonds, you produce debt, and you have to sell those bonds. And if you look at the interest rates, the real interest rates are very negative. Why would anyone hold bonds? Why would you hold cash? And so there's a big supply-demand imbalance that can only be met by the producing of more money and credit to deal with that situation. So you're going to have short-term interest rates much below the inflation rate, much below the long-term interest rates and so on, and you're going to have that monetized, and that lowers the value of money. And that has implications for currencies and a lot of markets.
I want to finish, since we have 10 minutes on, I want to bring it back to climate change, if I may, because it is the issue that will be coming into COP26 this weekend in Glasgow. It is an existential issue, and Larry Fink, you believe we're not doing enough?
Yes.
Thank you.
You wanted me to be precise. We're entering COP, and we're asking, as public companies, to make these large pledges, which is quite easy for many of us to make these pledges move forward. I'm very excited about being there and helping out in the dialogue. On the other hand, I don't think we are asking all of society to move forward together alongside the public companies. As I said earlier, the policies of government related to climate change have been more on supply mitigation, not demand mitigation. We have to be rethought. We have to think differently in how we are going to manage the transition. As I said, the transition is not a transition from brown to green, but from dark brown to medium brown.
But you described it in an article as dismal. You described the current achievements as being dismal and insufficient if we're going to get to the goal.
Yes, I did. And I
and that again. Right, and that will, Excellency, that will require everyone to do more. Are you prepared to do more?
Well, I think not only are we prepared to do more, we're doing more. I mean, today...
It's not enough.
As an energy-producing country, and here I'll speak maybe from a UAE perspective,
please,
to go and commit to a net zero by 2050, that's a statement of intent, and it's walking the walk. And it's going to take, just to our point here, not just the West, not just the East, it's the whole world. Everybody, solving the problem in one side of the world is not going to solve the problem here.
No, but I guess that we have been talking about this, and this is, and I'm asking obviously because you're talking from a private sector CEO, you have the ability to deploy resources. We have been talking about this for years, decades, and the one consensus seems to be we're not at the targets we need to be, Anna.
No, I just want to reinforce what my fellow board members have said. Private companies are doing a lot. We have already committed to being net zero, to being, on thermal coal by 2030. We cannot help our customers change without governments and regulators defining what is green and how we measure, so we can compare.
Are you being asked at the moment to bear the unfair or unshared burden of doing this? The government is shoving it all on your backs, but sort of moving along sweetly.
So I said I had 150 million customers and 4 million SMEs. Some of these in Mexico, Brazil. For some of these people, it's about being able to buy a home or put food on the table. Unless we have governments put up the right frameworks, so every sector has a transition plan that we all agree is the transition plan, we're not going to be able to help companies who are the majority of the jobs around the world. Small companies can barely make it to the end of the month. Go and tell them now they have to use clean energy where they can barely pay the bills. We need government transition plans by sector that are global and approved, so we know energy, transport, and so on. We're going to need fossil fuels and gas for some years. How many years? If I have to finance a new ship that is powered by gas today, we're not doing it. And we know gas is less polluting than others. So we need a plan that allows us to make it from here to there that is common, clear, and comparable. Otherwise, we cannot make it happen.
Steve Schwartzman.
It's going to go from some other place. If European banks don't do it, it's going to be some other banks, not to mention who. maybe Americans.
Steve Schwartzman, I'm bringing it full circle as we come to the end, because what you're saying is you need, or what Anna's saying is we need government. But we've already established earlier in this board meeting that government is short-term, while you're more long-term.
But what you need, it's very interesting. Different parts of the world, the whole green movement is basically, it's accepted that this is needed. In our country, we've got hurricanes, flooding, mudslides, wildfires. It's like, record heat. If you look at this, forget being a scientist. Your eyes are telling you something has changed, right? So it's just a question as that rolls around the world, how you implement it, how technology is used, how each of us in the audience up here, adapt to making the world a better place. One of the interesting things that I think Larry mentioned and Anna was also referencing is there's sort of unanimity, something should be done, but how you get from where we are today to like a green world is utterly undefined. And as a result of that, what we're finding around the world, particularly in the United States, is that people who extend credit are worrying that if they extend credit to anybody producing hydrocarbons, that they're not virtuous. And nobody's telling them not to extend credit, but that is occurring on an extremely wide-scale basis. If you try and raise money to drill holes, it's almost impossible to get that money. Now, the reason this is important, and why Anna was making sort of a plea for governments to get involved, is that with the decline curve of hydrocarbons, leave out coal, we're going to end up with a real shortage of energy. And when you have a shortage, it's just going to cost more. And it's going to probably cost a lot more. And when that happens, you're going to get very unhappy people around the world, on the emerging markets in particular, but in the developed world.
We're seeing it at the moment in Europe.
That what happens then, Richard, is you've got real unrest, and this challenges the political system, and it's all utterly unnecessary. You have to have governments agree what the rules of the road are, so society can successfully transition from where we are to where we need to be. Right now,
but we're seeing we're seeing in COP at the moment, COP26, exactly the difficulty. They're trying to do this. Now, each one of you has private meetings with government leaders. David Solomon, do you say this to them? We need to know the infrastructure that you are putting in place so that we can make the decisions and help our clients to make their decisions.
We talk about, I think Steve framed this very well. We need good public policy and a plan across the world to move this transition forward. And I think we have to continue to talk about it, Richard, as a transition. And so you're pushing us for very, very set answers. We're on a journey. We're early in the process of the journey, and the journey is going to require a real partnership between governments around the world to lay out a roadmap that the private sector and capital can participate with them in, and we will make progress. But we need good public policy matched with this.
I just want to come back to, and I'll come to you. But on that, David, we are in a transition, and that transition is not moving as fast as we would like in that sense. And if you like, we are making the sausages at the moment in that sense. What would help you to smooth that transition?
I wouldn't use your language to describe it, but I would say in any journey, okay, talking about it, trying to create awareness as to the real substantive issues and bringing attention to those issues so that people can debate transparently and work through them is constructive. And that's what's going on in society, and I think that's a very good thing.
So, 2 quick points. One, I completely concur with David. I think that what we need is a clear plan, a clear transition, not a switch on, switch off, that is sensible and that is economically sustainable in the interest of everyone. 2, similar to what's missing in this boardroom, and you're going to miss that in COP, got 1 billion people in China, nobody's around this table. You got another 1 billion in India, nobody around this table. There needs, really, everybody needs to be around the table, and we need empathy to understand what are their requirements in China, what are their realities in China, and the same thing with India, just to name a few. Thank you.
It's critical that the private sector, David, Richard, plays a crucial role in formulating the transitional measures. If you leave it to government, you'll get strange policies and laws and regulations. Our experiences with leaving things for governments to formulate dispensations, you get weird outcomes. So the private sector has to play a critical role, almost a determinative role in this partnership with government to formulate effective, responsible transitional measures.
Before we finish, last question that I've been asking people on Quest Means Business as we come to the end of interviews with them, because I know. So I'm going to, this board is going to pay a dividend to each of you. It's a small honorarium, and you can have it in a euro, a dollar, some gold, or a Bitcoin, which you can put under your bed for a rainy day. Ray Dalio, which will you take? Euro, dollar, gold, or Bitcoin?
I can't put a mix together, I guess. Right? I would take the gold.
Which one?
Gold.
The gold.
Gold. Steve?
Now, there's, you know, like I'd like to sprinkle a little, let you know where I am about this depreciation of the value of money thing. I would like to sprinkle a little bit of Bitcoin into that mix too.
Oh my God.
But I'm not,
Bitcoin and gold with a bit of Bitcoin on top.
if I had to choose, put your gun to my head, that's what I would choose. And that's I'm sorry, but the biggest asset is human productivity. And if you can tap that, so I'm looking at the new technologies and all of those are very, very exciting. That's the greatest way of increasing wealth. Gold is a dead asset and so on. But the amount of printing of money and the devaluations and the debt is a big force too. So I want that technology, a little bit of Bitcoin, and I want to bet on those other industries.
Excellency.
Come on, I'm last. You can't have it.
All right, you'll go last.
You got to let Steve first.
Steve Shortman.
I just want to own earning assets.
So you'll take, as long as it's earning, you'll take it.
As long as you can make things better and own wonderful things, you can come out and you can own dollars, or you can own, you know, whatever you want to convert that currency into, but you'll have more and more and more, and you won't be a professional victim.
I would take 50 cents in euros and 50 cents in dollars. Punto.
In using Ray's statement about technology and innovation, what Steve said, I'd put 100% in dollars.
David.
I've got...
No, David.
You want me next?
Oh, yeah.
That seemed out of order.
It did.
I think there are a lot of issues that we've talked about and we face, but I think the glass is half full. We have tremendous potential as a broad global community, and in that construct, you know, I choose dollars.
I've got 50,000 mine workers on our mines, so I'll go for gold.
Understandable. Go on. You wanted to be last.
All right. I'll take Bitcoin hedged in gold.
Well, look, you are the board.
We have a market here. We can trade with each other.
You are the board, so you could agree to issue us all with one of everything. Ladies and gentlemen, our panel.
Thank you, Richard.
Your last.
Thank you. Tough one. Thank you very much.